When 18-year-old Clara Holloway walked into the Black Lantern Saloon and offered a marriage contract to the territory's most dangerous man, the entire room exploded in laughter. They called her desperate, pathetic, a fat girl with 3 days left before losing everything. But when Boone Mercer stood up, 6 feet of scars and silent fury, the laughter died. What started as 1 hour of pretend became the most explosive love story the Arizona frontier had ever seen. Before you find out how this ends, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far Clara's story travels. The Black Lantern Saloon stank of spilled whiskey, tobacco smoke, and the particular breed of cruelty that frontier men wore like a badge of honor. Clara Holloway stood in the doorway, her heart hammering so hard she thought the entire room could hear it. The late afternoon sun cut through the grimy windows behind her, throwing her shadow long across the warped floorboards. For 3 seconds, nobody noticed her. Then somebody did. "Well, I'll be damned," a voice called out. "Boys, look what the wind blew in." The laughter started immediately. Not polite chuckles or surprised giggles, the kind of laughter that cut like broken glass. Clara's fingers tightened around the envelope she carried. Her father's lawyer had sealed it 2 days ago. Inside was a marriage certificate, blank except for her name. She took 1 step forward. The floorboards creaked under her weight, and she heard someone whisper something about the boards finally giving way. More laughter. Clara had spent 18 years learning how to keep her face still when people mocked her. She'd gotten good at it. Her expression didn't change as she crossed the room, even when Sal Peterson, a rail-thin ranch hand with breath that could kill a horse, made oinking noises as she passed. "You lost, sweetheart?" This came from Marcus Webb, the saloon owner. He leaned against the bar with his arms crossed, grinning like he'd just told the world's funniest joke. "Looking for the general store? It's 3 buildings down." "I'm looking for Boone Mercer," Clara said. The room went quiet. Not silent. Nothing in the Black Lantern ever went completely silent, but the laughter cut off like someone had sliced through it with a knife. Marcus's grin faltered. "What do you want with Boone?" "That's between him and me." "Listen, girl." Marcus straightened up, his tone shifting from mockery to something almost concerned. "I don't know what fool idea you've got in that head of yours, but Boone Mercer ain't the kind of man a girl like you should be." "Where is he?" Marcus jerked his thumb toward the back corner of the saloon, where the shadows pooled thick and heavy. Clara had to squint to make out the shape of a man sitting alone at a table, a half-empty bottle in front of him. She'd seen Boone Mercer before. Everyone in the territory had seen him at some point, usually from a distance, usually when he came down from the mountains to trade pelts or pick up supplies before disappearing back into the wilderness. He was the kind of man people talked about in whispers, the kind of man who'd survived 3 winters alone in country that killed experienced trappers, the kind of man who had a scar running from his left eyebrow down to his jaw, and nobody was stupid enough to ask how he got it. Clara walked toward his table. Behind her, she heard someone whisper, "She's actually doing it. Jesus Christ, she's actually—" Boone didn't look up when she stopped in front of his table. He sat perfectly still, staring at the bottle like it held answers to questions nobody had asked yet. Up close, Clara could see the scar was worse than she'd thought. It cut through his eyebrow, missed his eye by maybe half an inch, and carved a path down his weathered face. His hands, resting flat on the table, were massive and covered in old burns and cuts. "Mr. Mercer," Clara said. He still didn't look up. "I need to talk to you about a business proposition." That got his attention. His eyes lifted slowly, and Clara felt the full weight of his stare. They were gray, the color of storm clouds before the lightning started. He looked at her the way someone might look at an unexpected obstacle in their path. Not hostile, not kind, just assessing. "Not interested," he said. His voice was rough, like he didn't use it much. "You haven't heard what I'm offering." "Don't need to." Clara pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. She heard gasps behind her. Someone muttered, "Is she insane?" Boone's expression didn't change, but something flickered in those gray eyes. Surprise, maybe? Or irritation? "My father died 6 months ago," Clara said. She kept her voice steady, even though her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against the table to hide it. "He left me the Silver Vein mine, full ownership, but there's a condition in the will." Boone said nothing. "I have to be married when the judge reads it, 3 days from now." Clara opened the envelope and pulled out the marriage certificate. If I'm not married, everything goes to my Uncle Gideon. And? And I'm offering you $500 to marry me for 1 hour. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the piano player had stopped. Clara could feel every eye in the saloon boring into her back. Boone leaned back in his chair. You're joking. I'm not. $500. Yes. For 1 hour. 1 hour. We go to the courthouse, sign the certificate in front of the judge, he reads the will, and the mine transfers to me. After that, we file for annulment. You walk away with $500 cash. Boone stared at her for a long moment. Then he picked up his bottle and took a slow drink. When he set it down, he said, Why me? Clara had prepared for this question. Because you don't care what people think. Because you're not already married. Because you're not friends with my uncle. And because I figure a man who survives alone in the mountains for months at a time won't have any interest in staying married longer than an hour. That's a lot of assumptions. Am I wrong? Boone's mouth twitched. It might have been the start of a smile, but it died before it fully formed. What makes you think I won't just take your money and disappear? Because if you were going to rob me, you would have done it already instead of sitting here talking. This time, Boone definitely almost smiled. He looked down at the marriage certificate, then back up at Clara. People are going to talk. People already talk. Fair point. Boone drummed his fingers against the table. Your uncle going to make trouble? Probably. You prepared for that? I don't have a choice. Boone considered this. The silence stretched out so long that Clara started to think he was going to say no. Her stomach twisted. She'd burned every other option getting here. If Boone turned her down, she had nothing left. Then he said, Show me the money. Clara's heart jumped. She reached into her dress pocket and pulled out a rolled bundle of bills. She'd withdrawn everything from her father's account that morning. Every dollar he'd managed to save. She set it on the table between them. Boone picked up the bundle and counted it quickly. When he finished, he looked at her again. This is everything you have. It wasn't a question, but Clara answered anyway. Yes. If this doesn't work, if the judge doesn't buy it or your uncle fights it, you're broke. I know. And you're betting it all on a fake marriage to a man you've never spoken to before today. Yes. Boone set the money down. For a horrible moment, Clara thought he was going to push it back across the table and walk away. Instead, he said, When? The reading is in 3 days, but we should go to the courthouse tomorrow morning. Give the judge time to file the paperwork. Tomorrow morning, Boone repeated. He picked up the money and tucked it into his coat. What time? 9 o'clock. At the courthouse steps. Boone nodded once. Then he stood up. Clara had known he was tall. Everyone knew that. But sitting across from him hadn't prepared her for the reality of standing next to him. He was enormous. At least 6'3", maybe taller. Shoulders broad enough to block out the window light. When he looked down at her, Clara had to tilt her head back. 1 hour, Boone said. 1 hour, Clara confirmed. And then we're done. Yes. Boone glanced past her at the crowd watching from the bar. His expression hardened. When he spoke again, his voice carried across the entire room. Anyone got a problem with this? Nobody answered. Sal Peterson, who'd been oinking at Clara 5 minutes ago, suddenly found the floor very interesting. Boone looked back down at Clara. Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Don't be late. He walked past her toward the door, and the crowd parted like water. Clara stood frozen at the table, her heart still racing, barely believing what had just happened. Then she heard it. The laughter started again the moment Boone stepped outside. Quiet at first, nervous chuckles and whispered comments. Then louder. Marcus Webb slapped the bar and howled. Did you see that? Did you actually see that? $500. Girl's so desperate she's paying a mountain man to pretend to love her. Won't work anyway, someone else called out. Gideon's gonna fight it. Judge won't buy it for a second. Even if he does, Sal Peterson added, what's she gonna do with a mine? Can't even walk up a flight of stairs without losing her breath. Thinks she's gonna run a mining operation? The laughter swelled. Clara felt her face burning. She picked up the envelope with steady hands, muscle memory from years of practice, and walked toward the door. The crowd didn't part for her the way they had for Boone. She had to shoulder her way through, enduring every comment, every laugh, every pitying look. Outside, the evening air felt like a slap after the stuffiness of the saloon. Clara stood on the wooden walkway, trying to catch her breath. The sun was setting over the desert hills, painting everything gold and red. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Tomorrow morning, she'd show up at the courthouse with Boone Mercer, and maybe, just maybe, she'd walk away with her father's mine, with her inheritance, with a future. Or she'd walk away with nothing, and everyone would laugh even harder. Clara started the long walk home. Her boarding house sat at the edge of town, a sagging two-story building run by Mrs. Hartwell, who charged Clara double what she charged the other tenants because, as she'd explained with a pitying smile, larger girls need sturdier furniture, dear, and that costs more. The sun was almost gone by the time Clara reached her room. She lit the oil lamp and sat down on the bed, which creaked under her weight, same as it did every night. The envelope lay on the small table beside her. Inside was a marriage certificate with her name on it. Tomorrow morning, Boone Mercer's name would be there too. Clara thought about her father. Thomas Holloway had been a quiet man, serious and hard-working. He'd spent 20 years digging silver out of the mountain, building the mine from nothing. He'd never talked much about feelings, but he'd made sure Clara knew the mine would be hers someday. "You're stronger than people think," he'd told her once. "They look at you and make assumptions. Let them. Then prove them wrong." She hoped he'd be proud of what she was doing, or at least understand why she was doing it. Clara didn't sleep much that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she heard the laughter from the saloon, saw the way people looked at her, felt the weight of every cruel comment she'd endured since childhood. By the time dawn broke, she was already dressed. She wore her best dress, dark blue with buttons up the front, and her mother's old cameo brooch. Her hand shook as she pinned her hair up, and it took 3 tries to get it right. At 8:30, she left the boarding house. The walk to the courthouse took 15 minutes. She arrived early and stood at the bottom of the steps, watching the street. 9 o'clock came. 9:15. By 9:30, Clara's stomach had twisted itself into knots. He wasn't coming. Of course he wasn't coming. Why would he? He'd probably taken her $500 and ridden out of town before sunrise. She was an idiot for thinking this would work. An idiot for, "You're early." Clara spun around. Boone stood at the top of the courthouse steps, looking down at her. He wore the same clothes as yesterday, rough canvas pants, a worn coat, boots that had seen better days. But his hair was combed back, and he'd shaved. The scar stood out even more now, a pale line cutting across his weathered face. "I thought—" Clara stopped. "You're here." "Said I would be." "I know, but—" "I said I would be," Boone repeated. He walked down the steps and stopped in front of her. "You ready?" Clara nodded. She didn't trust her voice. Together they walked up the courthouse steps. Inside, the building was cool and quiet. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor. The clerk at the front desk looked up as they approached, did a visible double-take when he saw them together, and quickly schooled his expression into professional neutrality. "We're here to file a marriage certificate," Clara said. She set the envelope on the desk. The clerk opened it and scanned the document. "Both parties need to sign in the presence of a witness. Judge Morrison can handle that. He's in his chambers." He stood up and gestured for them to follow. "This way." Judge Morrison was a barrel-chested man in his 60s with gray mutton chops and eyes that missed nothing. He looked up from his paperwork when they entered, and Clara saw surprise flicker across his face before he caught himself. "Miss Holloway," he said carefully. "Mr. Mercer, what can I do for you?" Clara handed him the marriage certificate. The judge read it slowly, then he read it again. Finally, he set it down and looked at them both. "You're here to get married." "Yes, sir," Clara said. "Today." "Yes, sir." Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Miss Holloway, I presided over your father's funeral. I read his will. I know about the marriage clause." "Yes, sir." "And I know your Uncle Gideon has been making noise about contesting it." The judge's eyes moved to Boone. "Mr. Mercer, I'm going to ask you a direct question, and I want a direct answer. Are you marrying this girl for money?" Boone didn't hesitate. "Yes." Clara's stomach dropped. But Judge Morrison just nodded. "At least you're honest." He picked up the certificate again. "Most men would lie, pretend it's love at first sight or some nonsense." He looked at Clara. "Your father was a good man, worked hard his whole life, deserves to have his wishes honored. But I need to know this is what you want. Nobody's forcing your hand." "No one's forcing me," Clara said firmly. You understand that once you sign this, you're legally married, even if you plan to annul it later. I understand. Judge Morrison studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right, let's make this official. The ceremony took less than 5 minutes. Judge Morrison read the standard vows. Clara and Boone repeated them. The judge signed the certificate, then handed them each a pen. Clara's hand trembled as she wrote her name. Boone's signature was surprisingly neat, strong, clear letters that filled the space without hesitation. By the power vested in me by the territory of Arizona, Judge Morrison said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. He paused. You may kiss the bride, if you're inclined. An awkward silence filled the room. Clara felt her face burning. Boone looked at her, and for the first time since they'd met, she saw something like uncertainty in his expression. We don't have to, Clara started. Boone leaned down and kissed her. It was quick, barely more than a brush of lips, but Clara felt it all the way to her toes. When he pulled back, his expression was unreadable again. Judge Morrison handed Clara the signed certificate. Congratulations, Mrs. Mercer. You're officially married. Mrs. Mercer. The name sounded foreign in Clara's ears. Impossible. They left the judge's chambers and walked back through the courthouse. Outside, the morning sun was bright and hot. Clara stood on the steps, clutching the marriage certificate, her mind racing. She'd done it. She was married. In 3 days, the judge would read her father's will, and the silver vein mine would be hers, assuming her uncle didn't find a way to destroy everything first. What now? Boone asked. Clara looked up at him. Now we wait for the will reading. 3 days. And until then? Until then, Clara hesitated. She hadn't thought this far ahead. I suppose you go back to whatever you were doing before. I'll send word when the reading is scheduled. Boone frowned. Your uncle's going to hear about this within the hour. Probably already has. Probably. He's going to make trouble. I know. Where are you staying? Mrs. Hartwell's boarding house. Boone's frown deepened. That's not safe. It's all I can afford. You just gave me $500. That was for... I know what it was for. Boone cut her off. But if your uncle decides to pay you a visit before the will reading, Mrs. Hartwell's not going to stop him. Hell, she'll probably let him in and offer him tea. Clara knew he was right. Mrs. Hartwell had made it clear more than once that she thought Gideon should inherit the mine. A man knows how to run a business, she'd said. A girl your age has no business trying. What do you suggest? Claire asked. Boone was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've got a room at the Anderson Hotel. It's small, but it's got a lock. You can stay there until the will reading. Clara blinked. With you? I'll sleep in the chair. You take the bed. That's not... I can't ask you to... You didn't ask. I'm offering. Boone's tone left no room for argument. Get your things from the boarding house. We'll move you this afternoon. Clara wanted to protest. Wanted to say she could handle herself, that she didn't need protection, that she'd survived 18 years without help, and she'd survive 3 more days. But the truth was, she was scared. Gideon had made threats before, vague ones mostly, comments about how accidents happened in mining country, how girls who didn't know their place sometimes learned hard lessons. Clara had dismissed them as bluster. Now, with the mine actually within her grasp, she wasn't so sure. All right, she said quietly. Thank you. Boone nodded. Go pack. I'll meet you at the boarding house in an hour. He walked away before Clara could respond, his long strides eating up the distance. She watched him go, still holding the marriage certificate, still trying to process everything that had happened. She was married to Boone Mercer, the most dangerous man in the territory. For the next 3 days, he was her husband. And after that, Clara didn't know what happened after that. But right now, she had more immediate problems to worry about. She walked back to the boarding house, her mind churning. Mrs. Hartwell was in the kitchen when Clara came in, and her eyes narrowed immediately. Where have you been? Out, Clara said. Out where? That's my business. Mrs. Hartwell's lips thinned. I run a respectable establishment, Clara Holloway. I won't have you bringing shame on this house. Clara stopped at the foot of the stairs. I'm moving out. What? Today. I'll have my things packed within the hour. Mrs. Hartwell's expression shifted from annoyance to alarm. Now wait just a minute. You can't just... Where are you going? That's my business too. Clara climbed the stairs before Mrs. Hartwell could respond. In her room, she pulled out the battered carpet bag she'd brought from her father's house and started packing. She didn't have much: a few dresses, some underclothes, her mother's jewelry box, a photograph of her parents on their wedding day. She was folding her last dress when she heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Male footsteps. Clara froze. The footsteps stopped outside her door, then someone knocked, hard enough to rattle the frame. "Clara," her uncle's voice. "Open the door." Clara's heart started hammering. She looked at the lock, flimsy, barely more than decorative. If Gideon wanted in, he'd get in. "I know you're in there," Gideon said. "We need to talk." Clara crossed to the door but didn't open it. "About what?" "About the fool thing you did this morning." So he'd already heard. Of course he had. The courthouse clerk had probably sent word before Clara and Boone had even left the building. "I don't know what you're talking about," Clara said. Gideon laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Don't play stupid with me, girl. You married that mountain savage. Thought you could trick your way into keeping the mine." "It's not a trick. It's following the will's instructions." "The hell it is. You think Judge Morrison's going to honor a marriage that's obviously fake? You think I'm going to let you steal what's rightfully mine?" "The mine was my father's. He left it to me." "Your father was senile at the end. Everyone knows it. That will's a joke, and so are you if you think—" The door suddenly swung open, yanked from Clara's hand. But it wasn't Gideon who opened it. Boone stood in the hallway, one hand on the doorknob. He must have come up the back stairs. His expression was calm, but his eyes were cold as winter. "Conversation's over," Boone said quietly. Gideon's face went red. "This is none of your business, Mercer." "She's my wife. That makes it my business." "Your wife?" Gideon spat the word. "You expect anyone to believe that? Everyone knows she paid you $500 to pretend for a few days." "Don't care what people know or don't know," Boone said. "What I care about is you standing in my wife's doorway making threats." "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm stating facts." "Here's a fact." Boone took one step forward. He didn't raise his voice, didn't make any aggressive moves. But something in his posture changed, something that made Gideon instinctively take a step back. "You ever come near her again without her permission, we're going to have a problem. You understand?" Gideon's face was purple now. "You think you scare me?" "I don't think anything. I'm telling you how it is." For a long moment, they stared at each other. Clara held her breath. Then Gideon turned and stomped down the stairs, muttering curses under his breath. Boone watched him go. When the front door slammed, he looked at Clara. "You packed?" Clara nodded, not trusting her voice. "Good. Let's go." She grabbed her carpet bag. Boone took it from her without asking and carried it down the stairs. Mrs. Hartwell stood in the hallway, her mouth hanging open. "Mrs. Hartwell," Boone said politely, tipping his head. Then he walked out. Clara followed, feeling the weight of Mrs. Hartwell's stare on her back. Outside, Boone headed down the street toward the Anderson Hotel. Clara hurried to keep up with his long strides. "Thank you," she said quietly, for handling my uncle." "He'll be back," Boone said. "Men like that don't give up easy." "I know. And he's right about one thing. The will reading's going to be a fight." "I know that too." Boone glanced at her. "You scared?" Clara thought about lying, but what was the point? "Yes." "Good. Fear keeps you sharp." He shifted the carpet bag to his other hand. "But don't let it paralyze you. Your father left you that mine because he thought you could handle it. You believe him?" No one had ever asked Clara that before. People had told her she was too young, too inexperienced, too soft. They told her she couldn't possibly run a mining operation. They told her to accept Gideon's offers, take whatever small settlement he was willing to give, and be grateful. But no one had ever asked if she believed in herself. "I don't know," Clara admitted. Clara shed. "Fair answer." Boone was quiet for a moment. "But you walked into the Black Lantern yesterday, approached the meanest son of a bitch in the territory and made a deal. That takes guts. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." The Anderson Hotel was a 3-story brick building near the center of town, far nicer than Mrs. Hartwell's boarding house. Inside, the lobby was clean and well kept. The clerk behind the desk recognized Boone immediately and tried very hard not to stare at Clara. "Second floor," Boone told her. "Room 12. The room was small but clean. One bed, one chair, a small table. A window overlooked the main street. Boone set Clara's carpetbag down and gestured to the bed. "You sleep there. I'll take the chair." "That's not fair." "Wasn't asking if it's fair." Clara wanted to argue, but the look on Boone's face told her it wouldn't matter. "At least let me get you a blanket from the front desk." "Fine." She went back downstairs and returned with 2 blankets and a pillow. Boone took them without comment and set them on the chair. 3 days, Clara said. "That's all we have to make it through." 3 days, Boone agreed. He stood by the window looking out at the street. Clara sat on the edge of the bed, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried her through the morning was wearing off, leaving her hollow and shaky. "Why did you say yes?" The question came out before Clara could stop it. "Yesterday, at the saloon. You could have said no, could have told me to leave. Why didn't you?" Boone was quiet for so long that Clara thought he wasn't going to answer. Then he said, "Because you walked in there knowing everyone would laugh. Did it anyway. That's either brave or stupid, and I figured I'd find out which." "And?" He looked at her, still figuring it out. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. Outside, the sun climbed higher. 3 days until the will reading. 3 days until she found out if her gamble had worked. 3 days with Boone Mercer as her husband. Clara lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Her whole life had changed in 24 hours. Tomorrow, it might change again. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about what came next. Clara woke to the smell of coffee. For a confused moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it came back. The hotel room, the marriage, Boone sleeping in the chair by the window. Except he wasn't sleeping. He sat at the small table, 2 tin cups in front of him, steam rising from both. The morning light came through the window at an angle that said it was early, very early. Couldn't sleep? Clara pushed herself up, her dress wrinkled from lying down in it. "Don't sleep much anyway." Boone pushed one of the cups toward her. "Figured you'd want some." Clara took the coffee. It was strong and bitter, the way men drank it in mining camps. She forced herself to take a sip without making a face. "What time is it?" "Little past 6. Clara glanced at the window. The street below was mostly empty, just a few early risers heading to work. "Do you always wake up this early?" "Usually earlier." Boone drank his coffee in silence for a moment. "Your uncle stayed at the saloon last night. Bought drinks for anyone who'd listened to him talk about how he's been robbed." "How do you know that?" "Went down to check after you fell asleep. Wanted to know what he was planning." Clara set her cup down. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah, I did." Boone's tone was matter-of-fact. "Part of the deal. You paid me to marry you, and that means keeping you safe until the will reading. Can't do that if I don't know what's coming." "And what is coming?" "Trouble. Gideon's telling everyone the marriage is a fraud. Says Judge Morrison won't honor it. Says he's got witnesses who will testify you paid me, that it's all fake." Claire's stomach tightened. "Does he have witnesses?" "Half the Black Lantern heard you make the offer. So yeah, he's got witnesses." "Then we're finished." "Maybe. Maybe not." Boone leaned back in his chair. "Depends on how the judge sees it. Your father's will says you have to be married. Doesn't say anything about why you got married or how much you paid for it. But everyone knows. Everyone knows lots of things. Doesn't make them relevant in court." Boone finished his coffee. "Question is, can you convince the judge this is real?" Clara looked down at her hands. The same hands that had trembled signing the marriage certificate yesterday. The same hands that had shaken offering Boone the deal in the saloon. "I'm not a very good liar." "Then don't lie. Just don't tell the whole truth." "What does that mean?" "Means if someone asks why you married me, you tell them you needed a husband and I was available. Both true. You don't mention the money unless they ask directly. And if they ask directly, then you tell the truth. But you tell it your way." Boone stood and walked to the window. "People assume things. Let them. They'll fill in their own story, and sometimes that story's better than the real one." Clara thought about that. "You've done this before. Lied to people, I mean." "Everyone lies, just a question of how good you are at it. That's a depressing way to see the world." Boone glanced back at her. "Maybe. But it's kept me alive." They finished their coffee in silence. Clara changed into a fresh dress behind the privacy screen in the corner, dark green this time, with a high collar. When she emerged, Boone was strapping on his gun belt. "You're bringing that to the will reading?" Clara asked. "I bring it everywhere. But, your uncle's desperate. Desperate men do stupid things. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it." Clara couldn't argue with that logic. She fastened her mother's cameo at her throat and pinned up her hair. Her reflection in the small mirror looked tired, scared. "You ready?" Boone asked. "No." "Yes." They left the hotel together. The walk to the courthouse took 20 minutes, and with each step, Clara felt her dread growing. This was it. The moment that would decide everything. Either she walked out of that courthouse with her father's mine, or she walked out with nothing. A crowd had already gathered on the courthouse steps. Clara recognized most of them. Town busybodies who wouldn't miss this spectacle for anything. She saw Marcus Webb from the saloon, Sal Peterson, Mrs. Hartwell, and at least a dozen others. And there, at the center of the crowd, stood her Uncle Gideon. He dressed for the occasion in his best suit, his hair slicked back, his mustache waxed. He looked every inch the successful businessman. When he saw Clara approaching with Boone, his expression hardened. "Well, well," Gideon said loudly. "Here comes the happy couple." The crowd laughed. Clara felt Boone tense beside her, but he didn't respond. They climbed the steps. Gideon moved to block their path. "You know this won't work," he said quietly, for Clara's ears only. "The judge isn't a fool. He'll see right through this little charade." "Then I guess we'll find out," Clara said. "Listen to me." Gideon's voice dropped even lower. "I'm willing to be reasonable. Drop this nonsense, let me take the mine, and I'll give you 10% of the profits. That's more money than you'd see in a lifetime." "The mine is mine. I'm not giving it to you for 10%. You're not getting it at all." Gideon's jaw clenched. "You're too damn stubborn to see sense, just like your father." "My father was twice the man you'll ever be," Clara said. Something flashed in Gideon's eyes, rage maybe, or hatred. For a second, Clara thought he might actually hit her. Then Boone shifted, just slightly, and Gideon's attention snapped to him. "Got something to say, Mercer?" "Not yet," Boone said quietly. The courthouse doors opened. Judge Morrison's clerk appeared and called out, "The judge is ready. Everyone inside." The crowd filed in, filling the benches. Clara and Boone sat at the front on one side. Gideon sat across the aisle on the other. The clerk placed a stack of papers on the judge's bench, and a moment later Judge Morrison entered. Everyone stood. The judge took his seat and gestured for them to sit as well. "We're here today for the reading of Thomas Holloway's last will and testament," Judge Morrison began. He picked up the document and scanned it. "Before we proceed, I want to address the elephant in the room." Clara's heart sank. "It's come to my attention," the judge continued, "that there are questions regarding the legitimacy of Miss Holloway's, Mrs. Mercer's recent marriage." He looked directly at Clara. "Is it true that you paid Mr. Mercer to marry you?" The courtroom went silent. Every eye turned to Clara. She took a breath. "Yes, Your Honor." Gasps filled the room. Gideon actually smiled. Judge Morrison's expression didn't change. "How much?" $500. More gasps. Someone in the back whistled low. "And Mr. Mercer," the judge said, turning to Boone. "You accepted this payment?" "Yes, sir." "Why?" Boone didn't hesitate. "Because I needed the money." "For what?" "Supplies, gear. Winter's coming, and mountain winters are hard." Judge Morrison drummed his fingers on the bench. "So you married a woman you barely know for $500 and camping supplies?" "Yes, sir." "That doesn't sound like a real marriage to me." Clara's stomach dropped. This was it. They'd lost before they'd even begun. But Boone said, "With respect, Your Honor, what makes a marriage real?" The judge raised an eyebrow. "Excuse me? I'm asking what makes a marriage real. Is it love? Because plenty of people get married without it. Is it living together? We're doing that. Is it signing papers in front of a judge? We did that too." Boone leaned forward slightly. "Seems to me the only difference between us and any other married couple is we're honest about why we did it." The courtroom murmured. Judge Morrison looked thoughtful. "Most marriages are transactions," Boone continued. "Man wants a wife to cook and clean. Woman wants security in a home. They trade those things. Call it love if it makes them feel better, but it's still a trade. We just skipped the pretty words." "That's an extremely cynical view of marriage, Mr. Mercer." Maybe, but it's not illegal. Judge Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Then he looked at Gideon. Mr. Holloway, you're contesting this marriage on the grounds that it's fraudulent. Is that correct? Gideon stood. Yes, Your Honor. This marriage is clearly a sham designed to circumvent my brother's will. The will states that Clara must be married, the judge said. She is married. How is that circumventing it? Because the spirit of the will doesn't matter. The letter of the law does. Judge Morrison picked up the will and read from it. My daughter, Clara Holloway, shall inherit the Silver Vein mine in full, provided she is married at the time of this reading. That's what it says. Nothing about love. Nothing about how long they've known each other. Just that she must be married. But surely you can see— What I see, the judge interrupted, is a young woman who followed her father's instructions to the letter. What I also see is a man who spent the last 6 months trying to find loopholes in his brother's will so he can claim property that was never meant for him. Gideon's face went red. That mine should have been mine. Thomas knew I could run it. He was being sentimental, leaving it to a girl who has no business. Careful, Judge Morrison said softly. Very careful about what you say next. Gideon stopped. His hands were shaking with rage. The judge turned to his clerk. Read the final clause, the one Thomas added 3 days before he died. The clerk picked up a separate page and read aloud. In the event that my daughter Clara is subjected to discrimination, mockery, or verbal attacks based upon her physical appearance by any party seeking to contest this will, said party shall forfeit all claims to the Silver Vein mine or any other Holloway family assets in perpetuity. The courtroom erupted. People talking over each other, some shouting. Gideon stood frozen, his face draining of color. Judge Morrison slammed his gavel. Order! I will have order! The noise died down. The judge looked at Gideon. Mr. Holloway, just now you said your niece has no business running the mine. Were you about to comment on her physical capabilities? Gideon's mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's not— I didn't mean— Because I have witnesses, the judge said. Multiple witnesses who have heard you, over the past 6 months, make numerous comments about Clara's weight, her appearance, and her fitness to run the mine based on those physical attributes. Your Honor, Marcus Webb, Judge Morrison gestured to the saloon owner. Stand up. Marcus stood reluctantly. You were present 2 weeks ago when Mr. Gideon Holloway came into your establishment, correct? Yes, sir. And what did he say about his niece? Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He said she was too fat to climb the mine ladder, said she'd probably get stuck and they'd have to dig her out. The courtroom laughed nervously. Clara felt her face burning. Anyone else hear similar comments? The judge asked. Slowly, hands went up, more than Clara expected. Sal Peterson, Mrs. Hartwell, even the courthouse clerk. Judge Morrison looked at Gideon. Your brother knew you'd do this. That's why he added that clause. He knew you couldn't help yourself. This is ridiculous, Gideon sputtered. You can't— Those were private conversations. Shh! Nothing's private in a town this size, Mr. Holloway. You should know that. The judge picked up his gavel. Based on the evidence presented and based on your own statements made in open court today, I find that you have violated the terms of Thomas Holloway's will. All your claims to the Silver Vein mine are hereby forfeit. No! Gideon lunged forward. You can't do this. That mine is mine by right. Thomas was my brother. I deserve— 2 deputies stepped forward and grabbed Gideon's arms. He struggled, still shouting. Furthermore, Judge Morrison said, raising his voice, Clara Mercer, née Holloway, is hereby declared the sole legal owner of the Silver Vein mine and all associated assets, properties, and holdings. The transfer is effective immediately. The gavel came down with a crack that echoed through the courtroom. Clara sat frozen. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The mine was hers. Actually, hers. The deputies dragged Gideon toward the door. He was still shouting, his voice raw. This isn't over. You hear me, Clara? This isn't over. I'll fight this. The doors slammed behind him, cutting off his threats. Judge Morrison looked at Clara. Mrs. Mercer, the deed to the mine is with the land office. You can collect it this afternoon. Congratulations. Clara managed to nod. Her hands were shaking so badly she had to clasp them together. The judge stood, and everyone else rose as well. People started filing out, talking excitedly. Clara heard fragments of conversation. "Can you believe it?" Gideon's face when the judge read that clause. But none of it felt real. Boone touched her elbow. "We should go." Clara let him guide her out of the courtroom. The hallway was crowded with people, all of them staring. Some looked shocked, some looked impressed. A few looked angry. Outside, the afternoon sun was blinding. Clara stood on the courthouse steps, blinking against the light. "You all right?" Boone asked. "I don't know." Clara's voice sounded strange to her own ears. "I think so. I won. We won. You won. I just stood there." "You did more than that. What you said about marriages being transactions. That changed his mind. I could see it." Boone shrugged. "Just said what I thought." Clara looked up at him. This man who'd been a stranger 3 days ago. This man who was now legally her husband. This man who'd just helped her win her father's mine. "What happens now?" she asked. "You go to the land office, get the deed, then you figure out how to run a mine." "And you?" Boone met her eyes. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you want me to stay." Clara's breath caught. "The deal was 1 hour, just until the will reading." "Deal's done then. I kept my end." "You did." They stood in silence. Around them, people were still leaving the courthouse, still talking, but Clara barely heard them. "Why would you want to stay?" she finally asked. Boone was quiet for a moment. "Because that mine of yours is worth something, real something, and you're going to need help running it. You can hire workers, but you need someone you trust, someone who doesn't want to steal it out from under you." He paused. "And because I'm curious." "About what?" "About what happens when you stop letting people tell you what you can't do." Clara's throat tightened. Nobody had ever said anything like that to her before. "If you stay," she said carefully, "what would you want in return?" "A percentage of the profits, say 20%, and a place to live that isn't a hotel room. The mine has a cabin. It's rough, but rough is fine. Better than what I'm used to." Clara tried to think clearly. 20% was a lot, but Boone was right. She needed someone she could trust. And despite everything, despite barely knowing him, she did trust him. He'd kept his word. He'd stood beside her when everyone else was laughing. He'd defended her to the judge. "All right," she said, 20%. "But we do this properly, with contracts and lawyers." "Fair enough. And we stay married, for now." Clara felt her face heating. "It'll look strange if we annul it right after winning. People will talk." "People already talk." "They'll talk more." Boone almost smiled. "True." They walked to the land office together. The clerk there had clearly already heard about the will reading because he had the deed ready. Clara signed for it, her hand still shaking slightly, and walked out with a rolled piece of paper that represented her entire future. "I need to see it," she said. "See what?" "The mine. I haven't been there since my father's funeral. I need to see what I actually own." Boone nodded. "We'll need horses and supplies. There's a stable on 4th Street. My father kept 2 horses there." The stable was small and smelled of hay and manure. The owner, an older man named Pete, looked surprised when Clara walked in. "Miss Clara, heard about the will reading. Congratulations." "Thank you, Pete. I need to get to the mine. Are my father's horses still here?" "They are. Haven't been ridden much, though. Might be a bit spirited." "We'll manage." Pete saddled 2 horses, a bay mare for Clara and a larger roan gelding for Boone. Clara hadn't ridden in months, and it took her 2 tries to get into the saddle. Her dress wasn't made for riding, but she managed to arrange it so she wouldn't fall off. Boone mounted his horse in one smooth motion. He looked comfortable in the saddle, like he'd spent half his life on horseback. Probably had. They rode out of town heading east toward the mountains. The trail was rough and dusty, cutting through scrub brush and scattered rocks. The sun beat down mercilessly. Within an hour, Clara was sweating through her dress. "How far?" Boone asked. "About 2 hours. There's a canyon, Silver Canyon they call it. The mine's at the north end." They rode in silence for a while. The landscape grew rougher as they climbed, the desert giving way to rocky hills dotted with juniper and pine. Clara's horse picked its way carefully over loose stones, and she concentrated on staying in the saddle. "Your father must have loved you," Boone said suddenly. Clara looked over. What? That clause in the will, about protecting you. Takes real love to think that far ahead. Clara's eyes stung. He did. Loved me, I mean, even though... She stopped. Even though what? Even though I wasn't what he expected. My mother died when I was young, and he raised me alone. I think he hoped I'd be different, prettier, thinner, someone who'd attract a good husband and give him grandchildren. Clara laughed bitterly. Instead, he got me. He left you his mine. That says something. It says he ran out of better options. No. Boone's voice was firm. It says he trusted you more than anyone else, including his own brother. Clara didn't know what to say to that. They kept riding. The canyon appeared gradually, the land dropping away into a deep cut between rocky cliffs. Clara led them down a switchback trail that made her stomach clench. One wrong step, and both she and the horse would tumble down, but they made it. At the bottom of the canyon, the air was cooler, shaded by the high walls. A creek ran along the floor, and Clara could hear water trickling over stones. The mine entrance sat at the base of the north cliff, a dark opening framed by timber supports. Near it stood a cabin, just like Clara remembered, small, rough-built, with a sagging porch and a stone chimney. They dismounted and tied the horses to a post. Clara walked toward the mine entrance, her heart pounding. This was it. This was what her father had spent 20 years building. The entrance was bigger than she expected, tall enough to walk through upright. Wooden rails ran along the floor, tracks for the ore carts. The darkness inside was absolute. You got a lantern? Boone asked. Clara shook her head. Then we're not going in yet, not without light and not without knowing what condition the supports are in. Boone walked the perimeter of the entrance, examining the timber frames. When's the last time anyone worked here? About a month before my father died. He was too sick to come out, and he didn't trust anyone else to run it. So it's been sitting empty for 7 months. Yes. Boone crouched down and picked up a piece of rock. Silver ore. Good quality from the look of it. Your father knew what he was doing. Clara walked to the cabin and pushed open the door. Inside was one room with a bed, a table, 2 chairs, and a small stove. Everything was covered in dust. Her father's coat still hung on a peg by the door. She touched the coat gently. It smelled like him, tobacco and desert dust and old sweat. Place needs work, Boone said from the doorway. But it's solid, good bones. My father built it himself 20 years ago when he first staked the claim. He did good work. Clara sat down at the table. Dust puffed up around her. I don't know what I'm doing, Boone. I don't know the first thing about running a mine. You'll learn. What if I can't? What if everyone's right and I'm not strong enough or smart enough or... Stop. Boone crossed the room and sat across from her. You walked into a saloon full of men who hated you and made a deal with the scariest one there. You stood up to your uncle in court. You won your father's mine against every odd stacked against you. You're plenty strong. That was survival. This is different. No, it's not. It's all survival, just a different kind. Boone leaned back in his chair. Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, we come back with supplies and tools. We inspect the mine properly, see what condition it's in. Then we hire workers, people we can trust. Then we start pulling silver out of that mountain. Just like that? Just like that. Clara wanted to believe him, wanted to believe it could be that simple. Why are you helping me? She asked quietly. Boone looked at her for a long moment. Because I'm tired of living alone in the mountains. Because 20% of a silver mine is more money than I've ever had. And because... He stopped. Because what? Because I like you. You're honest. And you don't quit. Clara felt her face heating. I don't know if that's true. It is. You just don't see it yet. Boone stood. Come on. We should get back to town before dark. This canyon's not safe at night. They rode back as the sun dropped toward the horizon, turning the desert red and gold. Clara's mind raced with everything that had happened. The will reading, the mine, Boone offering to stay. 24 hours ago, she'd been desperate and broke. Now she owned a silver mine and had a partner who believed in her. It didn't feel real. Back in town, they returned the horses to Pete and walked to the Anderson Hotel. Clara's legs ached from riding, and her dress was filthy with dust. In the hotel room, she collapsed onto the bed. Boone took his usual spot by the window. Tomorrow morning, he said, We make a list of everything we need. Then we start. All right. Clara closed her eyes. She was exhausted, completely wrung out. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something she hadn't felt in years. Hope. The list took 2 hours to make. Clara sat at the small table in the hotel room with paper and pencil, writing down everything they'd need while Boone paced and called out items from memory. Lanterns, at least 6, oil for them, pickaxes, good ones, not the cheap ones that break after a week, shovels, timber for supports, nails, rope, dynamite if we can get it legally. Can we? Clara asked, not looking up from the paper. Probably not, but we'll need it eventually. Mines don't dig themselves. Clara added dynamite to the list with a question mark. What about workers? How many do we need? Boone stopped pacing. Depends on how big an operation you want to run. Your father was working it alone toward the end, but he wasn't pulling much ore. If you want to make real money, you'll need at least 10 men. Maybe 15. 15 men won't work for a woman. They will if you pay them well enough. And if they don't? Then I'll convince them. Boone's tone made it clear how he'd do the convincing. Clara looked at the list. It was already 2 pages long, and they were just getting started. This is going to cost a fortune. You've got the mine. Banks will loan against that. Banks won't loan to me. You're what? A woman? Young? Fat? Boone said the last word flatly, without judgment. None of that matters if you've got collateral. The mine's worth thousands, maybe tens of thousands if the silver vein runs deep. Any banker with half a brain will loan you startup money. Clara wanted to believe him, but she'd been turned away from enough places in her life to know better. You don't know how people look at me. I know exactly how they look at you. Same way they looked at me when I first came down from the mountains. Like I was something dirty they wanted to scrape off their boot. Boone sat down across from her. Difference is, you've got something they want now. That changes things. Does it? Only one way to find out. They went to the bank after breakfast. The First Territorial Bank sat on Main Street, a 2-story brick building that looked more impressive than it actually was. Inside, the air smelled of paper and furniture polish. The bank manager was a thin man named Whitmore with spectacles and a perpetually worried expression. He looked up when Clara and Boone entered, and his expression shifted immediately to barely concealed disdain. Miss Holloway, or should I say Mrs. Mercer, now. His tone suggested he found the whole thing amusing. Mrs. Mercer's fine, Clara said. She placed the mine deed on his desk. I need a loan. Whitmore didn't even look at the deed. I'm afraid that's not possible. You haven't heard what I'm offering as collateral. I don't need to. This bank has standards. Standards, Clara repeated carefully. Yes. We loan to established businesses run by experienced individuals. You are neither. Boone leaned forward. He didn't touch anything, didn't make any threatening moves, just leaned forward. Look at the deed. Something in his voice made Whitmore pick it up. His eyes scanned the paper. Clara watched his expression change as he realized what he was holding. The silver vein mine, Whitmore said slowly. That's right. Your father's mine. My mine now. Whitmore set the deed down like it might bite him. Mrs. Mercer, running a mine is extraordinarily complex. It requires expertise, experience, and money, Clara interrupted, which is why I'm here. I need $2,000 for startup costs, equipment, supplies, workers. $2,000 is a significant sum, and the mine is significant collateral. My father pulled $30,000 in silver out of that mountain over 20 years. The vein's not tapped out yet. Whitmore looked at Boone. And you are? Her husband and business partner. I see. And what's your experience with mining, Mr. Mercer? None, Boone said flatly. But I can read a map, follow a vein, and keep workers in line. That's more than most people can say. Whitmore's lips pressed into a thin line. This is highly irregular. Irregular doesn't mean impossible, Clara said. She kept her voice steady even though her heart was pounding. You loan money to people who can pay it back. I can pay it back, with interest. How? By selling silver. And if there is no silver, then you take the mine. But there is silver. My father's records prove it. Clara pulled out a ledger she'd found in the cabin. Every ounce he pulled, he documented. The vein runs deep. We're barely scratching the surface. Whitmore took the ledger and flipped through it. Clara watched his expression carefully. She could see the moment he realized she was right, the moment he understood that the mine was actually worth something. "I'll need to discuss this with the board," Whitmore said finally. "How long will that take?" "A week, perhaps 2. "I need an answer today." Whitmore's eyebrows shot up. "That's impossible." "Then we'll try another bank." Clara stood and reached for the deed. "Wait." Whitmore held up a hand. "There is no other bank. Not one that can handle a loan this size." "Then I suggest you make a decision." Boone stood as well. Together, they made for an intimidating pair. Boone with his size and his scar, Clara with her unexpected confidence. Whitmore looked between them, clearly calculating. 3% interest, he said. 1%. "This is not a negotiation." "Everything's a negotiation," Clara said. 1.5%, and you get first option on buying the silver we pull. That got his attention. Silver buyers competed fiercely for good ore. Having exclusive access to a productive mine would be valuable. "First option," Whitmore repeated, "at market rate. We're not giving you a discount." Whitmore thought for a long moment. Then he said, 2% interest. First option on silver purchases at market rate. Loan term of 1 year. 18 months. 15. Done. Clara held out her hand. Whitmore looked at it like he'd never seen a woman offer to shake before. Then he took it. His palm was soft and damp. "I'll have the papers drawn up by this afternoon," he said. "You can collect the money tomorrow morning." "Today," Clara said. "Mrs. Mercer, today, or we go to the Denver bank and tell them you turned down a chance to finance the richest silver mine in the territory." It was a bluff. The Denver bank was 3 days right away and probably wouldn't talk to her anyway. But Whitmore didn't know that. "This afternoon," he said tightly. 4 o'clock. "We'll be here?" Outside, Clara's legs were shaking so badly she had to lean against the building. Boone stood beside her, not saying anything, just being there. "I can't believe that worked," Clara said. "You made it work. We made it work. You did the talking. I just looked scary." Clara laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. $2,000. We actually got $2,000. "Now comes the hard part," Boone said. "What's that?" "Spending it right." They spent the rest of the day buying supplies. The general store owner, Mr. Patterson, nearly fell over when Clara walked in and started ordering equipment. He kept looking at Boone like he expected this to be some kind of joke. 6 lanterns, Clara repeated, and oil, 5 gallons. "That's a lot of oil," Patterson said weakly. "We're opening a mine. We'll need it." "Right, of course." Patterson started pulling items off shelves. "Anything else?" "Pickaxes, 10 of them, the good ones, not the ones you sell to tourists." Patterson's mouth twitched. "I don't sell to tourists." "You sold my father a pickaxe that broke after 2 days. He told me about it." "That was a defective—" "Get the good ones," Boone said quietly. Patterson got the good ones. By the time they finished, they'd spent nearly $500. Patterson helped them load everything into a wagon Clara had rented from the livery. The supplies filled the entire bed, tools and timber and rope and more. "You really doing this?" Patterson asked as they prepared to leave. "Opening the mine?" "Yes," Clara said. "Your father tried for years to make that place profitable. Never quite managed it." "My father worked alone." "I'm not." Patterson glanced at Boone, then back to Clara. "Well, good luck to you then." It didn't sound like he meant it, but Clara thanked him anyway. They drove the wagon out to the mine, arriving as the sun started its descent. The canyon looked different in the late afternoon light, deeper, more shadowed. Clara felt a chill despite the heat. Boone unhitched the horses and tied them near the creek. Then he started unloading supplies. Clara helped, carrying what she could manage. The timber was too heavy, but she hauled rope and tools and lanterns. "We need to inspect the mine before we do anything else," Boone said. "Make sure it's not going to collapse on us." "How do we do that?" Carefully, they lit 2 lanterns and walked to the mine entrance. The darkness inside seemed to swallow the light. Clara's heart hammered as they stepped across the threshold. The tunnel went straight back for about 30 feet, then curved right. The walls were rough-cut rock, and the supports were thick timber beams that looked solid. Their footsteps echoed strangely. "Stay close," Boone said. Watch where you step. They moved slowly, checking each support as they went. Some of the beams had started to rot, and Boone marked them with chalk, left, once to the right. They took the left branch first. It ended after 50 feet in a small chamber where the silver vein was visible in the rock face. Clara held her lantern up and saw the gleam of ore. There, she whispered. Boone ran his hand over the rock. Good vein. Wide. Your father knew what he was doing when he followed it. Can we mine it? If we shore up the supports first. Some of these are in bad shape. He pointed to a beam that looked half rotted. That one needs replacing before we bring workers in. Don't want the whole thing coming down. They explored the right branch next. It went deeper, angling down into the earth. The air got cooler and damper. Clara's lantern flickered in a draft. Where's that air coming from? She asked. Boone held up his lantern, following the draft. There, see that crack? Clara looked where he pointed. A fissure ran along the ceiling, barely wide enough to fit a hand through. Is that bad? Could be good. Means there's airflow, which we need. But if it gets wider, the ceiling could collapse. Boone pulled out his chalk and marked the spot. We'll need to monitor it. They worked until full dark, cataloging every inch of the mine. By the time they emerged, Clara's dress was filthy, and her arms ached. But she felt something she hadn't expected. Excitement. The mine was real. It was hers. And it was full of silver. They ate a cold dinner sitting on the cabin porch, bread and cheese they'd bought in town. The stars came out, more than Clara had ever seen in town. The Milky Way stretched across the sky like spilled milk. My father used to sit here, she said quietly. After work, he'd have a pipe and just sit. Good place to sit, Boone said. He loved this place, more than he loved anything else, maybe even more than he loved me. Don't think that's true. How would you know? Because he left it to you. If he'd loved the mine more, he would have kept working it until it killed him. Instead, he made sure you'd have it after he was gone. Clara thought about that. She'd spent so much time being angry at her father for dying, for leaving her alone, that she'd never considered it that way. Tomorrow we hire workers, Boone said, changing the subject. I'll spread word in town. We need men who know mining, but more important, we need men who'll listen. You mean men who won't question taking orders from a woman? That too. They slept in the cabin that night, the first time they'd spent a night outside of town. Clara took the bed. Boone made a pallet on the floor with blankets from the wagon. It should have been awkward, sharing such a small space, but somehow it wasn't. Clara lay awake for a long time, listening to the creak outside and Boone's steady breathing. She thought about everything that had changed in the past week. The marriage, the will reading, the mine, and Boone himself. This strange, scarred man who'd agreed to help her for reasons she still didn't fully understand. Boone? She whispered. Yeah? Why did you really say yes? At the saloon, the real reason. Silence. Clara thought he might not answer. Then he said, Because you looked at me like I was a person. Not a monster. Not a tool. A person. Clara's throat tightened. You are a person. Not everyone thinks so. Then they're fools. Boone didn't respond, but Clara heard him shift on his pallet. She closed her eyes and let sleep take her. The next week passed in a blur of activity. They hired workers, 10 men, all experienced miners who'd worked other claims in the territory. Most of them looked skeptical when Clara explained what they'd be doing, but the wages she offered were good enough to overcome their doubts. Boone took charge of the actual mining operation. He divided the men into teams, assigned tasks, and made it clear that anyone who couldn't follow orders would be gone by sundown. 2 men tested him in the first 3 days. Both left with bruises and without their pay. After that, nobody tested him. Clara handled the business side. She kept the books, managed supplies, and dealt with buyers. The first week, they pulled 30 pounds of ore from the mine. The second week, 50. By the third week, they were extracting nearly 100 pounds a day. The money started flowing. Not a flood, not at first, but a steady stream that grew stronger each week. Clara paid off part of the bank loan early, bought better equipment, hired 2 more workers, and people in town started looking at her differently. Not all of them. Some still whispered when she walked by, still made comments, but others tipped their hats, stepped aside to let her pass, called her Mrs. Mercer instead of that Holloway girl. The mine was changing her. Or maybe it was revealing who she'd been all along. One evening, about a month after they'd started operations, Clara was doing the books at the cabin table when she heard shouting outside. She ran to the door and saw Boone facing down 3 men she didn't recognize. They were rough-looking, armed with rifles. "This is private property," Boone was saying, his voice dangerously calm. "We just want to talk to the owner," one of them said. He was tall and mean-faced, with a scar across his knuckles. "She doesn't want to talk to you. Maybe let her decide that." Clara stepped onto the porch. "I'm the owner. What do you want?" The tall man smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Name's Garrett. I work for Mr. Sutton. He owns the Three Kings mine about 10 miles north of here." "I know who Sutton is." Everyone in the territory knew Sutton. He owned 3 mines and had a reputation for being ruthless. "Mr. Sutton's heard about your operation. He's impressed. Thinks you're doing good work." "Tell him I said thank you." "He'd like to make you an offer. Buy the silver vein. Generous price. More than fair." "Not interested." Garrett's smile didn't falter. "Maybe you should hear the number before you decide." "I don't care about the number. The mine's not for sale." "Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Sutton is a powerful man. It would be wise to consider his offers carefully." "I have considered it. The answer is no." Garrett's smile finally faded. "You're making a mistake." "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." The 3 men exchanged glances. Then Garrett nodded slowly. "I'll tell Mr. Sutton you declined, but he's not a man who takes no for an answer. He'll ask again." "And I'll say no again." "We'll see." They mounted their horses and rode off. Clara watched until they disappeared into the canyon shadows. Then she turned to Boone. "That was a threat." "Yes, it was." "What do we do?" "We keep working, and we watch our backs." 2 nights later, someone sabotaged the mine. Clara and Boone arrived in the morning to find that someone had tampered with the supports in the main tunnel. One beam had been sawn halfway through. If anyone had been working in that section, the ceiling would have collapsed. Boone found boot prints that didn't match any of their workers. He followed them out of the canyon, but lost the trail in the rocks. "Sutton," Clara said. "Probably." "We should tell the sheriff." "Sheriff won't do anything. Sutton owns half the law in this territory." "Then what do we do?" Boone looked at the damaged support. "We fix this, and we post guards at night." They started rotating night watches, 2 men always at the mine after dark. Boone took most of the shifts himself, sleeping during the day and prowling the canyon at night with his rifle. A week passed without incident. Then 2. Clara started to think maybe Garrett's visit had been an empty threat. Then the raiders came. It was 3 in the morning when Clara heard gunfire. She bolted awake, her heart slamming against her ribs. More shots coming from outside. She grabbed her father's old revolver from under the bed and ran to the door. In the moonlight, she could see men on horseback, at least 6 of them, circling the mine entrance. Boone and 2 workers were behind cover, returning fire. Clara's hand shook as she cocked the revolver. She'd never shot at a person before. Wasn't sure she could. One of the riders saw her on the porch and turned his horse her direction. He raised his rifle. Clara fired. The shot went wide, but it made the rider veer off. He circled back to the others, and Clara heard him shouting something she couldn't make out. The gunfight lasted maybe 5 minutes, though it felt like hours. Then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the raiders retreated. Their horses thundered out of the canyon, leaving only dust and the smell of gunpowder. Clara ran down to where Boone was crouched behind an overturned ore cart. "Are you hurt?" "No, you." "I'm fine. What about the others?" One of the workers, a young man named Tom, was clutching his arm. Blood seeped through his fingers. "Just grazed me," Tom said through gritted teeth. "I'll live." Boone examined the wound. "You'll need stitches. Clara, get the medical kit from the cabin." She ran back and grabbed the kit her father had kept for emergencies. Her hands were still shaking as she handed it to Boone. He cleaned and stitched Tom's arm with steady hands that suggested he'd done this before. Many times before. When he finished, Tom said, "Thanks, boss." Boone nodded. Then he looked at Clara. "This is going to get worse before it gets better." "I know." "Sutton's not going to stop, not until he gets what he wants." "Then he's going to be disappointed," Clara said, "because I'm not selling." Boone studied her face for a moment, then he almost smiled. "All right then. We fight." We fight, Clara agreed, and the war for Silver Vein Mine began. The attacks came every few nights after that. Never the same pattern. Sometimes gunfire from the canyon rim, sometimes men trying to sneak into the mine to plant explosives. Once, they found poison in the water barrel meant for the horses. Boone tripled the guards and started teaching Clara and the workers how to fight back properly. Not just wild shooting in the dark, but actual tactics, cover positions, fields of fire, how to reload fast when your hands were shaking. Clara learned she had steady hands when it mattered. The shaking only came after. The workers started looking at her differently too. The first time she shot a raider's horse out from under him, sending the man tumbling into the rocks, one of the miners actually cheered. After that, they stopped treating her like some fragile thing that needed protecting. Started treating her like their boss. It should have felt good. Instead, Clara just felt tired. 2 months after the first raid, they were sitting in the cabin after another sleepless night. Boone was cleaning his rifle. Clara was trying to do the books, but the numbers kept swimming in front of her eyes. "We can't keep this up forever," she said. "No. Eventually someone's going to get killed. Maybe one of our men. Maybe us." Boone didn't look up from his rifle. "Probably. That doesn't bother you?" "Of course it bothers me, but what's the alternative? Sell to Sutton?" "Maybe." That made Boone stop. He set down the rifle and looked at her. "You're serious?" "I don't know what I am." Clara rubbed her eyes. She couldn't remember the last time she'd slept more than 3 hours straight. "I'm just tired of being afraid. Tired of wondering if tonight's the night they burn us out or shoot someone in the back. Sutton won't stop even if you sell. He'll just find the next person to squeeze. That's not my problem. Isn't it?" Clara slammed the ledger shut. "Why does it have to be my problem? Why do I have to be the one to stand up to him? I just wanted my father's mine. I just wanted something of my own." "You have it. Do I? Or is this just going to go on until we're all dead?" Boone was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "What did your father tell you about this place?" "What?" "Your father. What did he say about the mine?" Clara tried to remember. Her father had talked about the mine constantly toward the end, about the silver, the rock, the endless work. But there was one thing he'd said more than once. "He said it made him free," Clara said slowly. "Said he'd rather die in that tunnel than spend another day taking orders from men who thought they owned him." "There you go. That's not an answer, Boone." "Yes, it is. Your father understood something most people don't. Freedom costs. Sometimes it costs everything you have, but it's still worth it. And if the cost is our lives, then at least we lived on our terms." Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that sounded like the kind of stupid philosophy men spouted right before they got themselves killed. But she couldn't, because part of her agreed with him. She'd spent 18 years living on other people's terms, being what they wanted, taking their insults and mockery because fighting back would just make it worse. The mine had given her a way out, a way to be something other than the fat girl everyone pitied. If she gave that up now, what did she have left? "I hate that you're right," she said. Boone almost smiled. "Get used to it." A knock on the door made them both freeze. Boone grabbed his rifle in one smooth motion and positioned himself between Clara and the door. Clara pulled her revolver from her dress pocket. "Who is it?" Boone called. "Deputy Miller?" Boone and Clara exchanged glances. Deputy Miller worked for Sheriff Hawkins, who worked for whoever paid him most. Right now, that was probably Sutton. Boone opened the door but didn't lower the rifle. Miller stood on the porch, hands visible and empty. He was a young man, maybe 25, with nervous eyes. "What do you want?" Boone asked. "Sheriff sent me. Says he needs to talk to Mrs. Mercer. Official business." "What kind of official business?" "Complaint's been filed about the disturbances out here." Clara stepped forward. "Someone files a complaint about us getting attacked?" "Complaint says you're the ones causing trouble, shooting at people, threatening honest miners." "That's a lie." "Don't matter what I think. Sheriff wants to see you tomorrow, noon, at his office." Miller shifted his weight. "You don't show up, he'll issue a warrant." "For what?" Clara demanded. "Disturbing the peace, maybe reckless endangerment." "I don't write them, ma'am. I just deliver them." Boone's jaw tightened. "Tell the sheriff we'll be there." Miller tipped his hat and left. They watched him ride out of the canyon before Boone shut the door. It's a setup, Clara said. Of course it's a setup. Question is what kind? Does it matter? Might. Boone set his rifle against the wall. If they arrest you, Sutton could claim the mine's been abandoned, get a judge to sell it for pennies. Can they do that? They can do whatever they want if the sheriff's in their pocket. Clara felt cold despite the warmth of the cabin. So what do? We show up tomorrow, but we're careful about it. Boone started pacing, thinking out loud. We bring witnesses, people who can testify that we've been defending ourselves, not starting fights. Who's going to testify for us? Everyone in town either hates me or is afraid of Sutton. Not everyone. Boone stopped pacing. Judge Morrison, he helped you before. He helped me inherit. Doesn't mean he'll risk his career for me. Won't know unless we ask. The next morning, they left 3 trusted men to guard the mine and rode into town with 2 others as backup. Clara wore her best dress, the dark blue one she'd worn to the courthouse. Armor of a different kind. Judge Morrison agreed to see them before the sheriff meeting. His office was cluttered with law books and papers, and he looked older than Clara remembered. More tired. Mrs. Mercer, he said, I heard about the troubles at your mine. Then you know we're defending ourselves, not causing problems. I know what I hear, which is considerably different depending on who's talking. The judge gestured for them to sit. What can I do for you? Clara told him about the attacks, the sabotage, the raiders. Miller's visit last night. The judge listened without interrupting, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he said, And you want me to what? Testify on your behalf? If it comes to that, yes. Mrs. Mercer, I'm a judge. I can't take sides in disputes I might have to rule on. This isn't a dispute. It's Sutton trying to steal my mine. Can you prove that? Clara opened her mouth, closed it. The raiders work for him. Can you prove it? They come right after his man threatens us. That's not coincidence. No, but it's not proof either. Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair. I believe you. For what it's worth, I think Sutton's behind all of this. But believing and proving are different things. So you won't help us. I didn't say that. The judge pulled out a piece of paper and started writing. I'm noting in the court record that you came to me today with concerns about harassment and threats to your property. That creates a paper trail. If something happens to you or the mine, there's documentation that you reported it. That's it? That's what I can do legally. Anything else puts me in a position where I can't judge fairly if this goes to trial. Clara felt her hopes sinking. So we're on our own. You're not alone. You've got workers who depend on that mine. You've got suppliers who want you to succeed. You've even got some people in town who are impressed by what you've built. The judge handed her the paper. Keep this. Make copies. Give one to the newspaper if you want. Sometimes the best weapon isn't a gun. It's making sure everyone's watching. They left the judge's office with the documentation, but not much hope. The meeting with Sheriff Hawkins was scheduled for noon. They arrived 10 minutes early. The sheriff's office was small and cramped, smelling of tobacco and old sweat. Hawkins sat behind his desk, a large man with a red face and cold eyes. Standing beside him was Garrett, Sutton's man. Clara's stomach dropped. Mrs. Mercer, Hawkins said. Mr. Mercer. Thanks for coming in. You didn't give us much choice, Boone said. Well now, Mr. Garrett here has filed a serious complaint. Says you've been shooting at his men, threatening them, running a dangerous operation that's putting people at risk. His men attacked us first, Clara said, multiple times. That's not how Mr. Garrett tells it. Then Mr. Garrett is a liar, Garrett smiled. Strong words from a lady. You want to see the bullet holes in my cabin, the sabotaged mine supports? Or maybe you'd like to talk to Tom, the worker who got shot. Accidents happen in mining country, Hawkins said. People get hurt. These weren't accidents. They were deliberate attacks ordered by Sutton because I won't sell him my mine. Hawkins' expression didn't change. That's a serious accusation. You got proof? The attack started right after Garrett threatened us. That's not coincidence. I made no threats, Garrett said smoothly. I delivered a business offer. Mrs. Mercer declined. That was the end of it. Except it wasn't, Boone said quietly. 2 days later, someone tried to collapse our mine. Week after that, raiders attacked. You want us to believe that's not connected? I want you to prove it's connected, Hawkins said. Can you? The silence stretched out. Clara knew they couldn't prove it, not in a way that would hold up with a sheriff who was already paid to look the other way. "Here's what's going to happen," Hawkins said. "You're going to stop making wild accusations about respected businessmen. You're going to run your mine quietly and peacefully. And if there are any more incidents, any more shooting, any more violence, I'm holding you responsible." "Even if we're defending ourselves?" Clara demanded. "Self-defense is a matter of perspective, and right now the only perspective I'm hearing suggests you folks are the problem." Clara felt rage building in her chest. This was a setup, all of it. Garrett files a false complaint. Hawkins threatens them with arrest if they fight back, and Sutton's men keep attacking until they either sell or die. "This is wrong," she said. "This is the law," Hawkins replied. "You got a problem with it, take it up with a judge. Until then, you're dismissed." Outside, Clara was shaking with anger. Boone steered her toward the horses. "Don't," he said quietly. "Don't what?" "Don't say what you're thinking. Not here, not where they can hear." Clara bit down on the words that wanted to come out. They mounted their horses and rode out of town in silence. Only when they were well clear of buildings did she finally speak. "They're going to kill us." "Maybe. And the law won't do anything because Sutton owns the law. That's usually how it works. So what do we do?" Boone looked at her. "We make it too expensive for him to keep trying." "How?" "We hit back. Hard enough that he decides the mine isn't worth the trouble." Clara thought about that. About what hitting back would mean. About crossing a line they couldn't uncross. "You mean we attack them first?" "I mean we stop waiting for them to come to us. We find where they're staging from and we make sure they can't stage anymore." "That's..." Clara stopped. "That's probably illegal. So he's trying to kill us. Difference is, we're not going to half-ass it." They rode back to the mine in silence. Clara's mind raced. Everything in her upbringing said what Boone was suggesting was wrong. You didn't take the law into your own hands. You didn't become the aggressor. But her upbringing had also taught her to be quiet and accept mistreatment and never fight back. And look where that had gotten her. That night, Boone took 2 of their best men and disappeared into the desert. They came back 3 days later, exhausted and covered in dust. "Well," Clara asked. "Found their camp. About 12 miles northwest. 20 men, maybe more. Well armed." Boone took the water she offered and drank deeply. "But they're sloppy. No real guards, no watch rotation. They think they're safe. What do we do?" "We prove them wrong." Boone's plan was simple and brutal. They'd wait until the raiders staged their next attack on the mine. While Sutton's men were busy shooting at shadows and empty buildings, Boone and a team would hit their camp, burn the supplies, scatter the horses, make it clear that this wasn't a one-sided fight anymore. Clara hated the plan, hated what it said about who they were becoming, but she couldn't think of a better option. The attack came a week later. Just after midnight, riders swept into the canyon, guns blazing. But this time, the mine was empty. All the workers were hidden in positions Boone had set up days earlier. When the raiders realized they were shooting at nothing, they tried to retreat. That's when Clara's men opened fire. The fight was short and vicious. 2 of Sutton's raiders went down. The rest fled, leaving their wounded behind. Miles away, Boone and his team were already at the raider camp. They moved fast, setting fires, cutting horses loose, destroying weapons and supplies. The few men left to guard the camp never saw them coming. By dawn, it was over. Sutton's operation had been crippled. Not destroyed, but hurt badly enough that reorganizing would take weeks. When Boone returned to the mine, Clara was waiting on the porch. She had coffee ready and bandages in case anyone was hurt. 2 men had minor wounds, nothing serious. "It's done," Boone said. Clara nodded. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she just felt hollow. They sat on the porch as the sun rose, not talking. Around them, the workers were checking equipment and tending to the wounded raiders they'd captured. One of them was conscious enough to talk. "Sutton's not going to let this go," the man said through broken teeth. "He'll come back harder." "Let him," Boone said. "We'll be ready." But Clara wondered if that was true. They'd won this round, but the war wasn't over. It might never be over as long as the mine was profitable and Sutton wanted it. That afternoon, a rider came from town. Not a raider, not the sheriff. Someone Clara didn't recognize, a thin man in dusty clothes who looked nervous. Message for Mrs. Mercer, he said. Clara took the sealed envelope. Inside was a note written in elegant script. Mrs. Mercer, I believe we got off on the wrong foot. I would like to discuss a mutually beneficial arrangement. Please join me for dinner tonight at the Grand Hotel. Come alone. Respectfully, Malcolm Sutton. Clara showed the note to Boone. His expression darkened. It's a trap. Maybe, or maybe he's ready to negotiate. You can't go. I have to. If there's a chance to end this without more bloodshed, there isn't. Men like Sutton don't negotiate. They just find new ways to cheat. Clara looked at the note again. Boone was probably right. This was probably just another scheme. But what if it wasn't? What if there was a way to end this that didn't involve more people getting shot? I'm going, she said. Then I'm coming with you. It says come alone. I'll be there anyway. He won't see me, but I'll be close enough to help if things go wrong. Clara wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she could handle this herself. But the truth was, she was terrified. The thought of sitting across a table from Malcolm Sutton made her stomach churn. All right, she said, but stay hidden unless I signal. That evening, Clara wore her mother's best dress, deep burgundy with black trim. She pinned her hair up and wore the cameo brooch. Armor again, different kind of battle. The Grand Hotel dining room was the fanciest place in town. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, the kind of place Clara had never been allowed to enter before she owned the mine. Sutton was already there, sitting at a corner table. He was younger than Clara expected, maybe 40, with graying hair and sharp eyes. He stood when she approached. Mrs. Mercer, thank you for coming. Mr. Sutton. They sat. A waiter appeared immediately and poured wine. Clara didn't touch hers. You've had quite a journey, Sutton said. From nothing to mine owner in just a few months. Impressive. I inherited the mine from my father. Yes, but you've made it profitable. That takes skill. Sutton sipped his wine. I respect that. I respect you. Is that why you've been trying to kill me? Sutton's expression didn't change. I don't know what you're talking about. Your men, the attacks, the sabotage. Mrs. Mercer, I run legitimate mining operations. I don't resort to violence. Then who's been shooting at us? Probably competitors. You're pulling good silver. That makes people jealous. Sutton set down his wine. Which is why I wanted to talk. I think we can help each other. How? I buy the silver vein mine. You get a fair price, more than fair, enough to set you up for life. And you don't have to worry about attacks or sabotage or any of it. You walk away rich and safe. And you get the mine. I get the mine. Yes, but you get peace, security, a future that doesn't involve sleeping with a gun under your pillow. Clara looked at him. He was smooth, practiced. This was a man who'd made many deals and won most of them. What if I say no? Then you stay out there in that canyon, fighting off whoever wants to take what's yours. Eventually, you'll lose. Maybe not this year, maybe not next year, but eventually. Sutton leaned forward. I'm offering you a way out, a good way out. You'd be a fool not to take it. Maybe I'm a fool then. Something flickered in Sutton's eyes. Don't be stupid, girl. You can't win this. I've won so far. You've survived. That's different, and survival has a limit. Clara stood up. Thank you for dinner, Mr. Sutton, but the mine's not for sale. Not to you, not to anyone. Sit down. We're not finished. Yes, we are. Clara turned to leave. Sutton grabbed her wrist. His grip was tight enough to hurt. Listen to me, he said quietly. I've been patient. I've been reasonable. But that patience has limits. You walk out of here, those limits are reached. Understand? Clara looked down at his hand on her wrist. Then she looked him in the eye. Let go of me. Not until you... A knife point pressed against the back of Sutton's neck. Boone had appeared from nowhere, silent as smoke. She said, let go, Boone said quietly. Sutton released Clara's wrist. She stepped back, her heart hammering. You're making a mistake, Sutton said. No, Clara replied. I'm making a choice, and my choice is to keep what's mine. She walked out of the restaurant with Boone behind her. Outside, her hands were shaking so badly she could barely unhitch her horse. You all right? Boone asked. No, Clara managed to mount. But I will be. They rode back to the mine under a sky full of stars. Clara's wrist ached where Sutton had grabbed her. But more than that, her resolve had hardened into something unbreakable. She wasn't selling. Not now. Not ever. Whatever came next, she'd face it. The war was far from over. But for tonight, they'd won another battle. And that would have to be enough. Sutton's retaliation came faster than Clara expected. 3 days after the dinner, a dozen armed men rode into the canyon at dawn. Not raiders this time. Professional gunmen with cold eyes and expensive rifles. Boone spotted them from his watch position and fired a warning shot that echoed off the canyon walls. The workers scrambled for cover. Clara grabbed her revolver and took position behind the ore cart near the cabin. But the gunmen didn't attack. They just sat on their horses at the canyon entrance, blocking the only way in or out. "What are they doing?" Clara asked. Boone lowered his rifle slightly. "Siege. They're going to starve us out." He was right. The gunmen settled in, making camp at the canyon mouth. They didn't shoot, didn't threaten, just waited. By the second day, Clara understood the problem. They had food for maybe a week. Water from the creek, but no way to get supplies from town. No way to sell the silver they'd already mined. The workers were getting nervous. "We could try to break through at night," one of them suggested. Boone shook his head. "They're expecting that. We'd lose half our men before we got close." "So we just sit here?" Clara asked. "For now." But sitting wasn't going to work. Clara could see it in the workers' faces. These were men with families, men who needed to get paid. Every day stuck in this canyon was a day they weren't earning money anywhere else. On the third day, 2 workers asked for their pay and said they were leaving. Clara couldn't blame them. She gave them what she owed and watched them negotiate their way past Sutton's men. The gunmen let them go without trouble. The message was clear. Workers could leave, but Clara and Boone couldn't. That night, Clara sat on the cabin porch staring at the stars. She'd been so focused on fighting that she hadn't thought about what winning actually looked like. Even if they survived this, Sutton would just try again. And again. Until one of them was dead or broken. "You're thinking about selling," Boone said from the doorway. Clara didn't deny it. "Would that be so terrible?" "Depends on what you want." "I want to stop being afraid. I want to sleep through the night. I want—" She stopped. "I don't even know anymore." Boone sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You know what I think?" "What?" "I think you're the stubbornest person I've ever met. And that's saying something, because I once knew a trapper who tried to fight a bear with a stick. Despite everything, Clara almost smiled. How'd that work out for him? Bear won, but the trapper gave it hell first." Boone was quiet for a moment. "Point is, you don't quit. It's not in you, even when you probably should. Maybe I should start." "Maybe, but you won't." He looked at her. "You want to know how I know?" "How?" "Because if you were going to quit, you would have done it already. In the saloon. In the courthouse. When Gideon threatened you. When the raiders came. When Sutton grabbed your wrist." Boone's voice was soft but certain. "You've had 100 chances to walk away. You never took them." Clara felt her throat tighten. "I'm tired, Boone. I'm so tired of fighting. I know. And I'm scared. All the time. I'm scared they're going to kill you. Kill the workers. Burn everything my father built. That's not weakness. That's being smart enough to see what's at stake." "Then what do I do?" Boone didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was thoughtful. "You ever notice how people underestimate you?" "Every day of my life." "That's their mistake. They see what they want to see. Fat girl, weak, scared. They don't see what's actually there." "And what's that?" "Someone who doesn't break. Someone who takes everything they throw at her and keeps standing." He paused. "Sutton's making the same mistake. He thinks if he squeezes hard enough, you'll fold, but you won't. And that's going to cost him." Clara wanted to believe that. Wanted to believe she was strong enough to outlast Sutton's siege. But belief didn't put food in their stores or break the blockade at the canyon mouth. The next morning, Clara made a decision. She called the remaining workers together, 6 men who'd chosen to stay despite everything. "I'm not asking you to die for this mine," she said. "Any of you who want to leave, go. I'll pay you what I owe, and there's no hard feelings." The men exchanged glances. Then Tom, the young worker who'd been shot in the first raid, stepped forward. We're not leaving, ma'am. Tom, you have a family, Joe, and they'll be prouder of me for standing with you than running when things got hard. He looked at the other men. We all talked about it. We're staying. Clara felt tears stinging her eyes. She blinked them back. All right, then we fight smart. How? One of the others asked. Clara looked at Boone. We make Sutton's blockade too expensive to maintain. They spent the rest of the day preparing. Boone taught the men how to move through the canyon without being seen, how to use the rocks and shadows, how to make one person look like five. That night, they started harassing Sutton's camp. Nothing big, just enough to keep the gunmen on edge. Rocks thrown from the darkness, gunshots that came from different positions, strange noises that made them think they were being surrounded. The gunmen started shooting at shadows, started arguing with each other, started making mistakes. On the fifth day, one of them rode back to town, probably to report that this was taking longer than expected. On the seventh day, 3 more left. Clara watched from the canyon rim as Sutton himself rode in with reinforcements. He looked angry. Good. Angry men made mistakes. He's going to try something different, Boone said beside her. Like what? Don't know. But sitting outside our canyon for a week isn't working, and he knows it. The answer came that afternoon. A rider approached under a white flag. Not one of Sutton's gunmen, Deputy Miller. Clara and Boone met him at the canyon entrance. Sheriff wants to see you, Miller said. Both of you. Says if you don't come in, he's issuing warrants for your arrest. On what charges? Boone asked. Assault, destruction of property, maybe murder depending on what happened to those raiders who went missing. Clara felt cold. We defended ourselves. That's what you say, but there's witnesses say different. Sutton's men claim you ambushed them, burned their camp without provocation. They attacked us first. Sheriff says that's for a court to decide. You come in peaceful, you get a trial. You don't, he sends men to drag you in. Clara looked at Boone. This was the trap. Either they went to town where Sutton controlled the sheriff and the courts, or they stayed here and became fugitives. We'll come, Clara said. Clara, Boone started. We'll come, she repeated. Tomorrow morning. Tell the sheriff we'll be there at 10. Miller nodded and rode off. The moment he was gone, Boone grabbed Clara's arm. You can't be serious. You have a better idea? Yes, we don't walk into a trap. It's not a trap. It's a trial. It's the same thing when the judge is paid off. Boone's voice was hard. You go to town, Sutton will have you arrested, maybe killed. Either way, you lose the mine. And if we run, if we become fugitives, we lose the mine anyway, and we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. Better than being dead. Clara pulled her arm free. I'm not running, not from Sutton, not from anyone. She met his eyes. I've been running my whole life, Boone, from bullies, from people who told me I was worthless, from every person who looked at me and decided I wasn't worth their time. I'm done running. This isn't about pride. Yes, it is. It's about looking at myself in the mirror and knowing I didn't quit when things got hard. Clara's voice shook, but her resolve didn't. I'd rather lose fighting than win by hiding. Boone stared at her for a long moment. Then he let out a long breath. You're going to get us both killed. Probably. And you don't care. I care. But I'm going anyway. Boone shook his head, but Clara saw something like respect in his eyes. All right, then we go together. And we go prepared. They spent the evening planning. Boone sent 2 of the workers to town with messages, one to Judge Morrison, one to the newspaper editor. Both messages detailed everything that had happened. The attacks, the sabotage, Sutton's threats. If Clara and Boone didn't come back, at least the story would get told. That night, Clara couldn't sleep. She lay in the cabin bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led her here. The saloon, the fake marriage, the will reading, the mine, Boone. She thought about Boone a lot these days, about how he'd become more than just a business partner, more than just the man she'd paid to marry her. Somewhere along the way, without her quite noticing, he'd become the person she trusted most in the world, maybe the only person she trusted at all. You awake? She whispered. From his pallet on the floor, Boone said, Yeah. If something happens tomorrow, Nothing's going to happen. But if it does, Clara swallowed hard. I want you to know I'm glad you said yes. In the saloon. I'm glad it was you. Silence. Then Boone said quietly, Me too. Clara closed her eyes. Whatever tomorrow brought, at least she wouldn't face it alone. They rode into town at dawn, early enough that the streets were mostly empty. Clara wore her burgundy dress again. Boone wore his gun belt and a coat that hid 2 more pistols. The sheriff's office looked the same as last time. Hawkins sat behind his desk. But this time Judge Morrison was there too. And the newspaper editor, a thin man named Fletcher. And half a dozen townspeople Clara didn't recognize. What's this? Hawkins demanded. Public hearing? Judge Morrison said. Mrs. Mercer has been accused of serious crimes. She deserves to face those accusations publicly. This is my office, and this is my courtroom now. Sit down, Sheriff. Hawkins' face went red, but he sat. Clara and Boone took seats at the front. The townspeople filled in behind them. Judge Morrison called the hearing to order. He read the charges: assault, destruction of property, reckless endangerment. Then he looked at Clara. How do you plead? Not guilty, Your Honor. Everything we did was in self-defense. That's a lie! The voice came from the back. Garrett pushed his way forward. She attacked our camp, burned our supplies. Her men shot at us without provocation. Your men attacked her mine first, Judge Morrison said. We were investigating reports of illegal mining operations. At 3 a.m, with rifles? Garrett's jaw tightened. We had reason to believe. You had orders from Malcolm Sutton to drive Mrs. Mercer off her land, the judge interrupted. Don't insult this hearing with lies. Your Honor, that's speculation. It's fact. I have testimony from 3 different witnesses placing Sutton's men at the scene of multiple attacks on the Silver Vein mine. Judge Morrison held up papers, including testimony from 2 of Sutton's own workers, who've decided they want no part of this anymore. The courtroom murmured. Clara's heart raced. She hadn't known about the witnesses. Garrett looked panicked. Those men are lying for money. They're testifying under oath, which carries serious penalties for perjury. The judge looked at Hawkins. Sheriff, do you have any actual evidence that Mrs. Mercer committed crimes, or just accusations from men who work for someone trying to steal her mine? Hawkins shifted uncomfortably. The accusations are credible. That's not what I asked. No physical evidence. Then these charges are dismissed. Judge Morrison brought his gavel down. Furthermore, I'm issuing a restraining order. Malcolm Sutton and all his employees are forbidden from coming within 1 mile of the Silver Vein mine. Any violation will result in immediate arrest. You can't do that, Garrett shouted. I just did. Get out of my courtroom. Garrett looked like he wanted to argue. Then he saw Boone stand up, and whatever he was going to say died in his throat. He left, slamming the door behind him. Judge Morrison looked at Clara. Mrs. Mercer, you're free to go. I suggest you return to your mine and get back to work. Clara stood on shaky legs. Thank you, Your Honor. Don't thank me. Thank your father for being smart enough to document everything. And thank the men who were brave enough to testify against Sutton. Outside, Clara gulped the cool morning air. She felt dizzy with relief. It was over. Actually over. We should go, Boone said, before Sutton hears about this and tries something stupid. They were halfway to their horses when Clara saw him. Malcolm Sutton stood across the street, flanked by 2 of his men. His face was dark with rage. This isn't over, he called out. Clara stopped. She should have kept walking, should have gotten on her horse and left. But something in her had changed over the past months, something that wouldn't let her run anymore. She crossed the street to face him. Yes, it is, she said. You lost. The mine is mine. The law says so. The judge says so. And if you come near it again, you'll be arrested. You think a restraining order scares me? I think you're a bully who's used to getting his way. But you're not getting mine. Clara stepped closer. You know what I learned these past few months? People like you only have power because people like me let you have it. We're scared. We believe you when you say we're worthless. We believe we can't fight back. You should be scared, but I'm not. Not anymore. You can send all the raiders you want. You can threaten me. You can try to steal what's mine. It won't matter because I'm not giving up, ever. Sutton's face was purple now. You're going to regret this. Maybe. But at least I'll regret it on my own terms. Clara turned and walked back to where Boone was waiting. Her hands were shaking, but her steps were steady. They rode back to the mine in silence. When they reached the canyon, the workers came out to meet them, and Clara told them what happened. The charges dismissed, the restraining order, the testimony that had saved them. The men cheered. Someone opened a bottle of whiskey that had been saved for a special occasion. They drank to victory, to survival, to the mine. Clara stood apart from the celebration, looking at the dark entrance to the tunnel her father had carved from the mountain. All of this, the fighting, the fear, the determination to hold on to something that was hers, it had changed her. She wasn't the girl who'd walked into the Black Lantern anymore. Wasn't even the woman who'd stood in the courthouse claiming her inheritance. She was someone new, someone she was still figuring out. Boone found her there as the sun set. "You did good today." "We did good." "No, that was all you." He was quiet for a moment. "What you said to Sutton about not giving up, you meant it." "Yes." "Good." Boone looked at the mine. "Because this place is going to take everything you've got. Mining's hard. Running a business is harder. There'll be more Suttons, different faces, same greed." "I know." "And you're ready for that?" Clara thought about it, really thought about it. Then she nodded. "I think so. Are you?" "Me? You're my partner, 20%, remember? That means you're stuck here too." Boone's mouth twitched. Could think of worse places to be stuck. They stood together as darkness fell over the canyon. Around them, the workers were still celebrating. Someone had started singing, badly. Tom was trying to teach the others a dance he'd learned somewhere. "Boone," Clara said quietly. "Yeah?" "When we got married, in the courthouse. That was fake, a business arrangement." "I remember." "What if it wasn't anymore?" Boone went very still. "What are you saying?" Clara turned to face him. "I'm saying the past few months, you've been the only person who believed in me, who stood beside me when everyone else was laughing or trying to kill me or telling me to give up. I'm saying somewhere along the way, this stopped being about business. Clara, I'm saying I love you, and I hope, maybe you feel the same way." Boone stared at her. In the dim light, his scar was a shadow across his face. Clara couldn't read his expression. Then he said, "I've loved you since the day you walked into the Black Lantern and offered me a deal. Thought you were the craziest, bravest person I'd ever met. Still do." Clara felt tears on her cheeks, happy tears this time. "So what do we do about it?" "I don't know. Never been good at this kind of thing." "Me neither." They stood there awkwardly, both of them uncertain. Then Boone reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough and scarred, but warm. "We could start with this," he said. "This is good." They walked back to the cabin hand in hand. It was such a small thing, but it felt huge, like crossing a threshold into something new. That night, they sat on the porch and talked until dawn. About the mine, about their plans, about the future they were building together. Clara told Boone things she'd never told anyone, about growing up fat in a town that hated fat people, about watching her mother die, about her father's quiet love and quieter disappointment. Boone told her about the mountains, about winters so cold your breath froze in your lungs, about the loneliness of being the kind of person people cross the street to avoid, about coming down from the wilderness and hearing her make that crazy offer and thinking maybe, just maybe, there was a reason to stay. When the sun rose, neither of them had slept. But Clara felt more awake than she had in months. The weeks that followed were the best of Clara's life. The mine produced steadily. The workers became a real team, loyal and hardworking. The silver they pulled from the mountain paid off the bank loan with money to spare. And Clara and Boone built something real. They tore down the wooden divider that had separated their sleeping areas in the cabin, moved Clara's bed to the center of the room, started sleeping beside each other like the married couple they'd pretended to be. It wasn't perfect. They argued about everything: how to run the mine, how to spend money, whether to hire more workers or buy more equipment. But the arguments never felt dangerous. They felt like two people figuring out how to build a life together. 3 months after the trial, Clara woke up to find Boone already dressed and standing by the window. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Nothing. Just thinking." "About what?" Boone turned to her. "About how we should do this properly." "Do what properly?" "Get married. For real this time." Not in a courthouse with fake vows and witnesses we don't care about. A real wedding. Clara sat up. We're already married. Legally, but that was business. I want... He stopped, looking uncertain. I want to stand up in front of people and choose you. Not because you paid me or because we needed to fool a judge. Because I love you, and I want everyone to know it. Clara's throat tightened. You're serious? If you want to, if you don't, we can just... Yes, Clara said. Yes, I want to. They planned the wedding for a month later. It would be small, just the mine workers and a few people from town who'd helped them. Judge Morrison agreed to officiate. They'd hold it at the mine, at sunset, with the canyon walls around them. Clara spent a week's wages on a new dress, white, with blue trim, fitted but not tight. The seamstress who made it didn't make a single comment about Clara's size, just measured and sewed and delivered a dress that made Clara feel beautiful. The day of the wedding, Clara woke up nervous, not scared, just aware that this was real in a way the courthouse ceremony hadn't been. This time, she was choosing Boone, and he was choosing her. She dressed carefully, pinned up her hair, and walked out to where they'd set up chairs near the mine entrance. The workers were already there, cleaned up and dressed in their best clothes. Judge Morrison stood at the front, smiling, and Boone stood beside him, wearing a new shirt and coat, his hair combed back, his scar visible and unmistakable. When he saw Clara, his expression softened into something that might have been awe. She walked toward him on legs that shook slightly, not from fear, from joy. Judge Morrison started the ceremony. He kept it short and simple. When he got to the vows, Clara spoke first. I promise to stand beside you, to trust you, to build something with you that's ours, to never give up, even when things get hard, especially when things get hard. Boone's turn. His voice was rough with emotion. I promise to protect you, to listen to you, to believe in you when nobody else does, to stay no matter what comes. You were never the woman they mocked. You were the strongest person in this territory. I saw it then. I see it now, and I'm not letting you go. Clara felt tears streaming down her face. Judge Morrison pronounced them married. Actually, married this time. Boone kissed her. Not the quick brush of lips from the courthouse, but a real kiss that made the workers cheer and whistle. They celebrated into the night. Someone had brought a fiddle. Someone else had brought more whiskey than any group of people could reasonably drink. They tried anyway. Clara danced with Boone under the stars. She wasn't graceful, had never learned how to dance properly, but Boone didn't seem to mind. He held her close and moved slowly, and Clara felt something settle in her chest. This was home. Not just the mine or the canyon. This. Boone's arms around her, the workers laughing nearby, the smell of desert air and silver dust. This was what her father had wanted for her, not just the mine, but a life, a real life. 2 years later, the Silver Vein Mine was one of the most profitable operations in the territory. Clara had expanded twice, hired 30 workers, and paid off every debt. She'd also become something unexpected, a voice for other women trying to make it in mining country. When a widow needed help claiming her late husband's stake, Clara was there. When a young woman wanted to learn the business, Clara taught her. Boone had become something unexpected too. The scary mountain man with the scar was now the mine's foreman, respected by workers and feared by anyone who tried to cause trouble. He'd also become a husband who brought Clara coffee every morning and listened when she talked about her plans and dreams. They'd bought out 2 neighboring claims and merged them with Silver Vein, built a real house to replace the cabin, still small, but solid and warm. Started talking about the future in terms of years instead of months. One evening, Clara stood at the canyon rim watching the sun set. Behind her, she could hear the sounds of the mine closing for the day, men calling to each other, equipment being stored, the routine she'd built. Boone climbed up to join her. Thinking? Always. About what? Clara looked at the empire they'd built. About how I used to think I had to be someone else to be worth something. Someone smaller, quieter, more acceptable. And now? Now I know that was all wrong. I was always worth something. I just needed to believe it myself. She looked at Boone. You helped me believe it. No, you did that yourself. I just stood beside you while you figured it out. Clara leaned against him. Thank you for standing beside me. Always. They watched the sunset together, two people who'd started as strangers bound by a desperate deal and become something neither of them had expected. Partners, friends, lovers, the foundation of each other's lives. In town, people who'd once mocked Clara now stepped aside when she passed. Not because they feared her, because they respected her. The girl from the saloon had become the queen of Silver Vein, the woman who'd turned humiliation into power, loneliness into love, and one desperate gamble into a legacy that would outlive them both. But Clara didn't think of herself as a queen. She thought of herself as someone who'd learned the hardest lesson there was, that the only person who could decide her worth was herself, that the only opinion that truly mattered was her own, that strength wasn't about being perfect or fearless or loved by everyone. Strength was about standing up when everyone expected you to fall, about fighting when fighting seemed pointless, about believing you deserved good things even when the world told you otherwise. She'd learned that lesson in blood and sweat and fear, but she'd learned it, and she'd never forget it. As darkness fell over the canyon, Clara took Boone's hand and walked back toward their house, toward the life they'd built from nothing, toward a future that was entirely their own. Behind them, the Silver Vein mine stood silent in the moonlight, a monument to stubborn courage and unlikely love. And Clara smiled, because she knew her father would be proud.